Move to question 15. I call on the Honourable Member for Arbory, Castletown, Malew, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. I would like to ask the Minister for Health and Social Care how much has been spent on lateral flow testing kits, A, in each of the last 4 months, and B, since March 2020. Thank you.
Minister for Health and Social Care to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. For each of the last 4 months, the spend on lateral flow testing kits is as follows. In September, nothing. In October, £294,000. In November, £955,500. In December, £3,135,500. The total spend since March 2020 on lateral flow testing kits is £5,846,145. The Isle of Man has benefited from a strong supply and distribution chain since the decision in August to implement these new approaches to the use of lateral flow devices in our community. Tests are currently sourced and provided by Newfoundland Diagnostics, an organisation based in the UK, with community distribution led by Manx independent carriers. Now that the immediate requirement to establish a supply chain capable of meeting demand is complete and stable, the Department intends to explore alternative supply and distribution routes via a formal procurement process. The procurement process is likely to commence within the next 4 weeks and will be handled carefully so not to risk the island's supply chain, given the demand for lateral flow devices remains very high in the UK and internationally.
Supplementary, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Minister, for that very detailed answer. How much does the Department pay for each unit, and does this come from the Department's budget or from the COVID fund? Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr President. The individual kits are £2.45, while the packs of 5 are £11.75. So overall it works out at £2.35 for each test. The Department pays for these and then recoups funding through a COVID reclaim from the COVID contingency funding.
Supplementary, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Minister. When carrying out this research, I looked at what's happening in Guernsey, and at the moment they appear to be getting theirs direct from the National Health Service at a very, very, very low cost. Is that something we could potentially look at? Thank you, Mr President.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. As I said, we're looking to implement a formal procurement process, which I believe would include looking at the NHS supply chain. The key thing for us at the moment is to make sure we don't risk our stable and secure supply chain that we currently have. The UK has obviously been reporting some significant issues in terms of accessing lateral flow devices through the NHS supply chain in recent months, and that's not a situation we want to be in.
Supplementary, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President. Would the Minister agree with me that we should thank all of the people who've been involved in delivering a huge amount of lateral flow tests, including those posties from the Post Office who've helped Manx independent carriers following the situation that arose in the run-up towards Christmas? Secondly, would the Minister be prepared to circulate all information about all procurement to do with the purchase, the packaging, the delivery, and so on? Just because that might well be helpful. I realise it was an emergency situation, but it might be quite helpful to understand better how procurement works, for full information for the procurement and the contracting to be circulated.
Minister to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Yes, I would echo the Honourable Member's thanks for everyone that's been involved in the sourcing, procuring and delivering of these essential devices for our community. I'm not entirely sure what the question is asking in respect of the procurement info. I suspect you're talking about the emergency procurement processes that were followed at the early stages of the pandemic. If that's the case, I'm more than happy to go back to the Department and see what information we can find to circulate to Honourable Members in that respect.
Thank you, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. In the UK media recently, there's been a suggestion that the test units will have to be paid for in the relatively near future. Is this something that's being considered by the Department, or will that be left to the COVID response team? Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. No, that's not something that's been considered at this point by the Department. It is something that would probably form part of the COVID response group's considerations, as that's where really all of our COVID strategy sits, rather than within individual departments.
And final supplementary, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President. I know I'm not in any way trying to create extra work. I'm merely implemented when money has been spent on lateral flow tests within the scope of this question. I think it would be quite useful to evaluate how the procurement and the contracting worked during recent months in reflective lateral flow tests.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. I take the member's comment about not wanting us to do any extra work, and so I will rescind the offer to circulate any extra information. But no, in seriousness, the department has asked the internal audit team inside Treasury to have a look over the procurement processes in exactly that vein, to see actually what can we learn from what happened, what can be done better if this needs to happen again, and how do we really make sure our emergency procurement processes are robust. So as part of the information I circulate, I'll make sure to provide some information on that for honourable members as well.